So you probably know by now that I have this comic called Sylver Road. So this neat thing about Sylver Road is, like many stories, it has locations. And you know where you can make locations? In Minecraft. So yeah, I thought it would be fun to try to remake some of the locations from my comic inside Minecraft, and I figured I'd document this in some Minecraft videos, and maybe I can make this a series and show you my building process and how my journey figuring these builds out. And also, this is something new I'm trying. I'm trying out the mod Axiom, which is a fancy building mod where you can do all sorts of crazy things. I can show you some of these tools when we're going to use them. I've messed with this mod very little just to test it out. I'm going to show you what I'm going to build first. So this is what we're going to be building today. So this is a location in Chapter 2 of Sylver Road. This is a shrine to the Earth Goddess that's in the mountains. And it's in a sinkhole, as you can see here. And we're going to be trying to build this inside of Minecraft. So I'm just going to start out by taking some stone and just establishing some of the basic geometry of this build. This is the ground of the build. This is going to be the ground of the build. I'm just going to real quick establish some the dimensions. I'm going to pretend the middle point. Is this tree here. So I'm just going to build until I feel like that distance is right, because the edge of this sinkhole will be about where the viewer is in this drawing. I think to help me out, I'm just gonna make a little thing that's represents about how tall the tree might be, and say the viewer maybe about this high. How does that feel? I think I just want to give myself a bit more room just in case. So now I just want to set up a wire frame of some more lines from the center just to establish the dimensions. So let's try box select and make something that looks about the same distance. It doesn't need to be exact because it's just terrain. So yeah, I got my selection. All right, let's try fill. Try fill. Select stone. I'm just gonna do that again for the other ones. We have the basic dimensions. I think what I'm going to do is make a perimeter around here. It's kind of the shape of the valley. So I imagine it's sort of circular, but it's also it's rocky, so it's a little bit on the jagged side. As you can see, there's some cliffs here that kind of protrude a bit more. I'm going to try to use the modeling tool because I think that allows me to make lines, sort of. Right click on one of those points. So yeah, I right clicked again, and that made the stone go down where I clicked. I want to put it on the same level, so I'm just gonna drag that. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep doing that. Just adjusting these as I go. Well, if I select that option, that kind of smooths it out a bit. That's probably nice. I'm just gonna press enter, and now we got a perimeter. I just want to work on filling this in. I don't know. I'm not familiar enough with Axiom yet to really know how to do that quickly. So I might just do that by hand. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll get to the cliffs. Alright, so I filled in enough of this perimeter so that there's all that's left are some squares. I think what I'm going to do with these is just use World Edit to fill these in. This is what I've been using for a longer amount of time. It's simpler, there's not quite as much you can do with it, but in some cases it's quicker than just going into the Axiom editor. Place the region with stone. I'm just going to do that. Alright, so now this whole inner space is all filled in. We have a little bit of a floor to work with. But of course, the floor isn't entirely level. I imagine the center is a bit lower, and around the edge of the cliffs it's a little bit higher. So we're going to try to get that effect. So I'm just gonna find where I want like the main viewpoint to be, and from there I'll just like build up. I think this is a good spot for the viewpoint because this shape didn't end up quite as jagged as some of the others. So like you'll end up looking mainly at the more interesting shapes. I think that could be good. So I'm gonna try to see if I can raise the terrain to that level. So yeah, this is what elevation does. It's pretty much raises the land, but I want it to be much wider and smoother than this because the change is going to be very gradual. If the shape's a bit off, I can go back and refine it later. Alright, so we got like a bit of a basin shape here now. Now we have the terrain sort of like dipping down as it goes towards the center. Of course, we can do with a little bit of adjustments. Alright, there's still a few places where the shape looks a bit weird, but I think for now I'm gonna worry about that when I get to like the refining shape stage. I just want to get the basic geometry in. So now it's time to start figuring out the cliffs. So as you can see, there are pretty high cliffs around this valley, this basin. So I think what I'm going to do is go to the back there. I've got like a bit of a vertical section here. I'm just going to go back to my viewpoint so I can get a good vantage point. So let's say I'm looking up, how high do I want the cliffs to be going? About that high, I think is a good height. So that's how high the cliffs are going to be. They're also going to be a bit further back from the very edge of the ground here. But yeah, I think now what I'm going to do is make the outer perimeter. I might try using the modeling tool again. I think I'm just going to click on various points around the edge of the valley and then raise all of these points up to where the cliff face is, and then I'm just gonna make them go further back from the center. It's gonna adjust all these. So now all these points are elevated to the same level, and now I'm just gonna make them just go a bit further back from the center. And then I think I want to have them all go up to different levels. To make it look a bit more natural, gonna just select points here and there. We've got the shape of our cliffs. And get rid of this pillar right here. This is more like a guide, really. Alright, so now we have the top of the cliffs set up. Now we want the actual cliff part of the cliffs. So I'm just going to start like using the same modeling tool to make a few lines between the cliffs and the ground. Just going to go around, select a point on the top, select a point on the bottom, just make a line. So now we have a bit of a wireframe. You can see a bit more of the cliff shapes coming together. I'm just going to use these lines I made as guidelines. And so I've made like a triangle selection. So now let's select one of these triangle options. That'll fill in that surface of a triangle. It's kind of like how 3D models are made. All the surface of a 3D model is just made a bunch of triangles. That's sort of the method I'm going for here. It's a few holes. I don't think I'm going to worry about the holes yet. I'm just going to at some point I'm just going to go around by hand and refine some of these shapes. About halfway through adding the triangles, you can start to see more of the cliff shapes here. Looking kind of janky right now, but of course we'll refine that later. Got much more of a substantial looking landscape here now. Make like a hole in the wall for my vantage point now, because the characters in the story, when they enter this valley, they go through a tunnel. Yeah, there's some holes. It's looking a little weird. We're gonna refine that, but before we go like just by hand refining some of this, we did like the big cliff shapes. I'm gonna do some of the smaller cliff shapes. So I think I'm gonna just go around here and there and add some like outcroppings. Just try to make it look a little bit more interesting. I want to get like the effect of some of the cliffs like overlapping each other, like there is here in this drawing. And I also want to like leave some like ledges for plants to grow, because that's something that's happening in this drawing. So maybe we'll have like an overhang there. I'm just gonna go around and do shapes kind of like this. You know, this bit here is looking a bit too stark. I think I want to just make that flow a little nicer. So when I see things like that, I'm just gonna go, you know, make a triangle, kind of like that maybe. Yeah, we're already starting to get some more interesting ledges here. It's starting to make a big difference. And I think when I make these like ledge shapes, I'm gonna try to keep them generally near the bottom of the cliffs. The tops of the cliffs will be relatively more plain. I think right now there's a lot of like shadows going on over here, but not as much on this side. I might try to add more shadow shapes on this side just to even things out a bit. Alright, I think I might be done with like the basic shapes of these ledges now. So yeah, now the cliffs are a bit more detailed looking, still a bit janky in places. So it's a good start. It's a good start. I think before I start getting some blocks in my hand, I'm gonna go also to the top of the cliffs and just put some ground there because we're gonna be putting trees. I'm gonna be putting trees and things up there. Just need something basic to put up there. It's not gonna be very visible. Select some points around the edge. I think I'm also gonna take all these and just make them go a bit higher because I imagine the land slopes up above the cliffs. And now I'm just gonna fill this in. So we've got some of the basic shapes set up here now. Can't quite say it's solid because there are a bunch of holes everywhere. But yeah, now what I'm pretty much gonna do, I'm just gonna go around and look at where the terrain looks rough and just start just like by hand adjusting some of the shapes, filling in holes. I'm just gonna go around this whole thing and just do a pass like this. So essentially we did like the big shapes and then we did like the medium shapes. Now we're doing the small shapes. So now we have a more solid looking shape here, a lot smoother looking. I think it's time to build the block that isn't stone. What we're gonna do is start off by like painting in where the grass is, and then everything else will be the stone. So like the ground, all the like ledges, and also on top of the cliffs, I'll be painting in grass. And then once I paint in the grass, I'll probably just like fill in everything else with a stone block. So let's start doing that. Try setting my active block to grass. I just want it to affect stone. So there we go. So I can just paint on stone. I think I want to make that, I'll keep it big for doing like the valley and on top of the cliffs, but on the ledges I'll probably make it smaller. Some of the edges won't be so refined, we can just edit those. But yeah, now this valley area is getting all filled in with grass. We'll go and do the cliffs on top as well. Just go crazy coloring all of this in. You may notice that the shape of the land on top of the cliffs is a lot more geometric looking, not as natural. That's okay because it's not meant to actually be seen. So that's the top of the cliffs filled in. Now just ledges. I'm gonna decrease my brush size. Maybe it's like 2. See, I'm just gonna go around some of these ledges and paint in some grass. I'm just painting in grass in some of these areas I feel like it makes sense for grass to like cling onto the cliffs and grow. I think that's about all the ledges that I want grass on. I gotta change the stone color, so in the drawing it's kind of like a pale yellow green sort of color. There's not really a lot of good pale green options in Minecraft, so I'm probably just gonna go for sandstone. And when I get to like the shading part, like the texturing, I might like put some blues in there. Even though it's not quite what's in the drawing, it'll probably still have the same sort of feeling. I think we want the magic select first, and we can use that to select all the stone. So smooth sandstone, click on that, and enter. We've got a bit more color in this build. The colors aren't quite right. When we get to texturing, I'll probably make it look more accurate. I might put some blues in the shading. I can get the effect across. Something else that could help is to change the biome color for the grass. So there's a biome painter here. Let's try to find like a taiga biome because we want to get that kind of bluish feel. So now the grass is looking more blue. It's not 100% correct. It's not quite the right shade of blue, but it's closer. This tool's a little bit finicky. It's working in ways I don't quite understand. And I can also fill in the biome with world edit, so brush, biome, sphere 6, taiga. Can't quite do as much at a time, but it's more reliable, I feel. So yeah, we filled the grass in, we filled the sandstone in. There's still a few places like right here where it's a bit odd, where the brush isn't like filled in weirdly, so I'm just gonna go around like the borders of where the grass meets the sandstone and just refine it. There's a tool I could actually use in Axiom. If I go press Alt, it opens this menu. I can select some building tools. So let's do replace mode. So instead of breaking and placing the block at the same time, I can just right click and places the block. That makes it a lot easier to do that. I think like in places like this where the grass is on top of the sandstone, it looks a little odd, but I'm probably gonna do some sort of in-between block in between to like kind of look like the vines and the hanging plants. So right now it looks a little strange, but once I get to texturing all this, it should probably look better. I think mainly I just don't want sandstone on top of grass. Grass on top of sandstone is fine for now. So now these ledges look a bit cleaner. There's not grass or sandstone in weird places where they shouldn't be. Go up here now. I don't want the grass to go too far down. Again, I'm gonna do like the hanging vines texturing thing, so it doesn't need to be too refined right now. Alright, so that's all refined. Now I think I want to start coloring this more, like adding some gradients to the cliffs. In the drawing, it's like we kind of got this like cool pastel looking thing. Cool, but also kind of warm. It looks cool, but bright. And right now, like with the sandstone and the grass, it's looking more warm than I want it. I think part of that is because we can see the size of the grass, but we're going to be covering that with foliage and hopefully that'll look nicer. I want to like try to find a cool sort of color that I can gradient with the sandstone. In the drawing it's sort of green, but there's not really good green options in Minecraft, so we're just going to try to do our best to like get a similar sort of effect, but not use like the exact same colors. Maybe clay is kind of cool. Light blue maybe. Light blue terracotta is pretty dark. That would probably be good for the tunnel, but I don't think I want to use it for the gradient. Clay is pretty close, but could there be an in-between? There is a gradient tool in Axiom where you just put 2 blocks there and see what blocks go in between. Maybe like mushroom stem could be a good in-between. And start pinning in clay like around the bottom third of these cliffs. There we go. So yeah, in the drawing it kind of goes from light green to like a cooler, darker green. Though in this build it's going to be more like a light yellow to a sort of bluish gray, which should give the same effect overall. Again, part of adapting things into Minecraft is like Minecraft doesn't have a lot of the block colors you may want, so you just gotta find colors that have a similar sort of effect. Now let's choose mushroom stem. And do that down the middle. We got the beginnings of a gradient here. As you can see, the lines between the different levels of the gradient is pretty obvious. And so that means we're gonna dither these. What that means, doing something like this, just like doing speckles of blocks, just down and transitioning to the other block. Like starting kind of dense, like there's a lot of blocks, and then it gets thinner. I think before I change this gradient, I'm probably gonna adjust the gradient based on what might be shaded and what might be highlighted. So like in the rock faces that I think would catch more light, I'd probably pull the sandstone down more. And in places that are more in shadow, I'll pull the clay up. So I think first I'll just do like the border between the clay and the mushroom stem. I'll find areas in the mushroom stem that might be more shaded, then put clay in there. And then I'll also find areas of the clay that might be more highlighted and put more mushroom stem there. So yeah, I think clay would extend up here. It'd also like go up there a bit to like kind of separate those two rock shapes. Because shading can be used to like make the separate the shapes from each other more. On the other side of ledges like that, I'll put some clay. Also put some clay like around where the cliff meets the grass to make that look like it kind of like recedes behind the grass a bit more. Areas like this where like the cliff face is relatively flat, but shading can help like make it look like there's a part of the rock juts out anyway. Yeah, shading's good just to make things recede more, even though the actual blocks don't really recede. That's looking good. It doesn't need to be perfect because we're going to be like dithering this as well. Yeah, now I'm going to do the opposite. So maybe this cliff face right here would be a bit more highlighted. So areas where it looks like maybe less steep might catch the light more. Now I'm going to do the sandstone mushroom layers. So now we can use mushroom stem to shade the sandstone layer. There's not as much like ledges going on the sandstone layer, so this shading is going to be a bit simpler. So we say shaded it with the mushroom, and now we highlight it with the sandstone. Already this is looking a lot more interesting. The shapes are really popping out now with all the shading we did. So I think now I'm just going to go around and dither some of these just to make it look a little bit softer. Just going to go around and do stuff like this. So that'll help make the transition between these shades of color a little bit softer, a bit less obvious. So I've done the texturing. I think like the dithering kind of makes it feel more like rock, because rock has that kind of rough texture. Near the top, I just used World Edit to made a random brush to put some of these blocks in here, because it's farther away, and also World Edit I think was easier for like the smoother gradient that's near the top, in contrast to like the more detailed gradients that are on the bottom with these ledges here. There's still a bit more texturing to do before we get to all the plants and the various features. Of course, it's time to like make the hanging plants I talked about. So like, as you can see, between like the foliage on top and the cliffs, there's like these bits of plants that hang down. I want to do that to help transition between the grass and the cliffs a bit more, and I think that'll just really bring things together. So let's figure out a block to use. The closest color is a block of diamond. I don't think I want to use that. Do I want to use wet sponge? Do I have to use wet sponge? That's too yellow. Good, I don't have to use the wet sponge. I want to go for like kind of like blending in between the dirt and the cliffs. Occasionally you have bits hanging down like that. What about just regular stone? because maybe that will kind of look green from a distance. It does look more green compared to everything else because it's like next to some worm blocks like the mushroom stem. But I kind of want something a bit more. I want something more saturated. Mossy cobblestone? Maybe. If it were a little bit bluer, I think it'd be good. How does it look if I mix in a bit of light blue terracotta? Will that kind of like make the whole thing look more blue? And maybe I'll just like do a little bit of clay to like soften some of the transitions a bit. That might be the way to go. So let's give that a try. Alright, almost done. Putting on the finishing touches here. And I think that's all the vines done. Let's take a look. Yeah, this is looking pretty good. But of course, right now we just have kind of empty terrain. There's nothing on it. We need some plants, some trees, some various things. I think I'm gonna start with just getting the stuff on the top of the cliff done. I think that'll be a good thing to just get out of the way. So I want to make some trees, and of course, there's a way to like just get some trees done really quickly. So up here, there's like some pine trees, and there's some smaller trees that are a little bit more yellowy. So what I'm gonna do is make some prefab trees and just build those somewhere else, and then I can use those to make a brush and axiom and just paint some trees on top of these cliffs, and that can be done really quickly. So I'm just gonna start making some trees. They can be pretty basic. They don't need to be too detailed. So I'm just gonna make a few tree types here. I think I'll make 5 different types of the spruce trees and then maybe 3 types of azaleas since they're less frequent. So yeah, I think what I want to do first is go over to the cliffs and count the distance that seems good for these trees. I'm just gonna like put a tree here. And I want to make it a height that looks good from that vantage point down there. I think that's looking alright. Maybe it could be a little bit taller, but I think that's pretty good. About 35 blocks tall, so I think that'll be what I aim for with all these trees. So yeah, let's make this first tree 35 blocks tall, and each one, they'll be like 1 block different each. Alright, so that's about 35 blocks, I think. I'm just going to set up the other trunks. I'll set up some of the smaller trees as well. They'll be about half as tall as these other ones. Alright, so now I got some trunks set up. And now I'm going to start putting leaves on all these. And the leaves can be pretty simple. These trees are just going to be far away, so I don't need to do anything too fancy. I'm just going to go around the trunk like this and place leaves in a way that feels organic. I might start making the leaves a bit thinner as it goes higher to get that triangular pine shape. And just a few leaves like that to top it off. And that's what I'm going to do for all these other trees as well. And there we go. Those are some trees. And now I'm going to select each one by one and try to use that to make a brush. Use the box select tool and make sure that box covers the whole tree. So once I select that, I can copy. That's all the trees in the stamp brush now. So now let's head back over to the top of the cliffs. Start getting some trees up there. And start with the smaller yellow trees because they're more frequent and closer to the center. I think I'll just turn down the frequency of the pine trees to 0. So in the default settings, that's too dense. I just want a sprinkling of these trees. I'm just gonna do that a few times around the top of the cliffs. Before I add the pine trees, I'm gonna make sure these are all, because this one is like placed on top of a dirt block like that. I don't want it to look like that, so I'm just gonna go around at the base of these to make sure they look like they're actually going into the ground. This one got placed. I'm just gonna get rid of this one. I want it right on the edge there. Now it's time to put in some of the pine trees, and these are gonna be most of them, and they're gonna be behind the other ones. They're gonna be pretty dense. So let's turn down the chance of the pine trees and set all these to about 20. I think they could be closer together because this is the background, essentially. They can be pretty dense. Just gonna go around and put these everywhere. I might not cover the whole surface with these trees, just so it looks like a little bit more natural. Let's try not to put the trees on top of other trees. We got some trees up there. I do kind of wish the atmospheric perspective on those were a bit stronger, but yeah, I don't know if there's much I can do there. I could make the leaves, I could have chosen maybe lighter blocks for leaves, but also I want this to look good at every time of day. So if I make it look lighter, then at night it'll look weird. I think it's pretty good. I think I also want to get some foliage set up on top of the cliffs and the ledges. I'm gonna wait before doing like the grass and everything down here, but I think for the cliffs and ledges, I'll just start now just so I can have that done. So for that, go to the script brush and select the grass option. And then I can edit this. So right now it just has tall grass and short grass. Alright, I think I'm just gonna start off just making this ferns. I also want to add short grass and bushes. I also want to add the tool mask so it only goes on grass. So let's try. I want the targeted position below to be grass. So I want there to be a lot of ferns so that it covers the sides of the grass blocks a bit more. So it's just gonna go around the edge of the top of the cliffs there. I don't need to cover the whole thing because very little of that is actually going to be visible. So I'm just going to go around the edges of it. I'm just going to repeat that process for bushes, smaller ferns, and short grass. Alright, that's all the foliage. Pretty much the upper region of this whole build is pretty much done. Everything I have to do now is in this valley down here. The foliage on the ledges really helps make it feel less brown and actually more that bluish green color I want. What I might do as a small touch is take some of the grass and put on like the mossy cobblestone sort of areas, just help that transition a little bit more. In Axiom, you can select the force place option, just place blocks where they wouldn't normally be able to go, so I can use this to make that transition a little bit nicer. Alright, so I've placed short grass on some of these mossy cobblestone areas. I'm also going to go around the top of the cliffs as well. And that's all the short grass. Alright, now for real, I think the cliff parts of this build is done. These are looking really nice. They just start out as janky looking stone triangles, and now they're quite pleasant to look at. But of course, the important part of this build is everything that's down here. The cliffs are just the background. In the center, we got this pomegranate tree on a little platform. There's a pathway up to it, some various bushes around and trees, other details. So let's get started on this tree. It's in like a raised platform with grass in it. Let's just see how big we want that platform. I think it would be maybe one block bigger. So I think for the walls, I might want to stick to sandstone, but I might also want to see if there's a darker, maybe slightly greener option. Because in this drawing, this color is the same as the bottom of the cliffs. But of course, I use clay. There's not really a clay I can use. And I still want to keep that yellowish tone. Does birch look weird? It would be cool. It would be nice if it were darker looking than the top of the cliffs. So it has more of a look of contrast. I think that kind of works. And then like this platform has like grooves, like 5 grooves along it to like drain water. It'll be hard to replicate in the Minecraft scale, but we can do something like that. If you look at the drawing on top, there's some green there. There's some moss. There's some moss there. Let's see if I can replicate that. Yeah, it's a little bit of a contrast, but I feel like I could find a block that could blend the two. What about this? That's kind of good. That kind of works. It looks convincing enough. We are working with Minecraft, so it's not going to be perfect, but I think it's convincing enough. So let's figure out this tree. It's kind of like a purpley trunk. The branches kind of go out, and then they go up. The leaves are kind of sparse, and then of course there's the fruit. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that same purpley tone. Pale oak. That is kind of purpley. I could probably use that for the base. This tree is pretty straight. It's not too twisty. It kind of goes straight up. It's kind of like the shape the tree makes in the drawing. I mean, it's pretty close. Maybe I'll use magenta for the branches to get more of that purpley look. Alright, so these aren't connecting, but I think in Axiom there's a way to get these to connect. I think Tinker. I can right click on the side of this fence and that'll make those connect together. That's pretty nice. Usually in vanilla Minecraft you wouldn't be able to do this, but in Axiom you can. Is the magenta it's not too much, is it? I think I'm pretty happy with this. I think I managed to really capture the shape of the tree in the drawing. The leaves are pretty sparse, so I don't need to place too many of these. And then of course we have the pomegranates. This is a pomegranate tree, and they're the most important part of the tree, but also probably the part I don't know how to do. My first thought, maybe pots. I just place these around, but they're a little bit brown. Let's just place a few of these and see how they look from a distance. Kind of. It could work. If there's no better option. I think the pots are okay. They're close enough in color, and they kind of have a similar level of saturation, where it doesn't feel too weird. Like from a distance, they look close enough. There we go. That's the tree. And I'll start to do the stuff that's around the tree. So we have this like shallow pool of water that's around the platform of the tree. There's like a walkway around it, this like stone stool, these basins in the path. So let's start working that out. Probably put slabs at the bottom of the pool so it looks shallow. Put moss at the bottom. There's a lot of the paths are like made of white mosaics. And diorite, it looks noisy enough to look like maybe mosaics that have aged. And it's also underwater, so it's not going to be too obvious. How does this look? Hold on. Stop it. Stop everything. Everything's going wrong. Hold on. Not updating things, the blessing and the curse. And there's some water. Now I do kind of wish the water were less of an intense blue. I find that the water in like the cherry grove biomes is pretty nice, but that'll also change the grass color, and I want to keep the grass this color. I want to see if I can also get an effect of algae growing in the water, because you can see in this drawing there's a little bit of plants growing in the water. And I think with Axiom that is possible. Let's try the nether sprouts and then turn force place back on. Place those like above the water here and there, so it looks like algae. It's pretty good. I think it's good that the ledges are just like the plants are just one color because it helps them not be so contrasty. But like where the viewer is going to be, I think it's fine to have some more variation in the colors. All right, I want to start getting the pathways in now. So I think we'll mix in the diorite, maybe some other white blocks. We'll first do the area around the pond, and then make a pathway up to the tunnel. The course is a bit more detailed looking. It does have that swirly shapes. That is like a shape that occurs in these paths. I wonder if it would look too bright, because the diorite does look more aged, which is nice. I might mix a little bit of this in, but not too much, because I want to still keep that aged feel. See, I'm just going to start placing polished diorite around, and then it'll like fade into the raw diorite. as it goes more towards the grass. I also wonder if there's like a good transition between diorite and grass. Maybe light gray concrete powder. Alright, for this, I might want to turn on the game roll. I might want to turn gravity off, and I know that's an axing thing, because below this build is an empty space, so I don't want my concrete powder to fall. So that'll help transition between the diorite and the concrete powder. Or diorite and the grass. And I think now I'll actually make the path between here and the tunnel. It's kind of like a winding path. There's a few swirly shapes in there. I don't know if I'll be able to do that on this scale. Kind of place these in a random organic sort of pattern. I think maybe more polished diorite closer to the pool and less towards the tunnel. So I figure this part of the path might be more weathered. I'll just sprinkle in a few of this chiseled quartz to get that swirly shape feel. Just a few more little like stone details. There's the basin, some of them are broken. I think I'll make those out of birch. It's gonna be weird to build these on the scale. So there's like the stool. Do I want one block back maybe? Basins, there's 5 of them arranged around. Because when I look directly down, ideally they look like the 5 points of a star. I think that's looking pretty good. Now I'm just gonna make them basins. Alright, so I think this one and the one behind the tree are full of water. The other ones are broken. Not perfect, but it's not much. At this scale and this color palette, they're feeling pretty tall as well. Yeah, doing it all wrong. It's really strange looking basins, but what am I gonna do? I'll just hide them with plants. Alright, now before we add all the bushes, there's only really one more really detail we need to add. There's these trees that are around, that are sprinkled around. There's only a few of them. I think instead of doing the brush for these, I'm just gonna build all these by hand. Prismarine is kind of the right color. Again, I want the trees go like maybe that high. Like they look like they go halfway up the cliff from this perspective. And they do have slight leans. It's looking pretty accurate. I think I want to just add a few more trees that aren't in that drawing as well. Now the leaves of these trees are quite yellow. That's going to be difficult to replicate in Minecraft. I don't want to give them like yellow concrete leaves because I still want the leaves to feel like leaves. So I might just settle for azalea unless I do something really weird and like use horn coral. How will this look? I mean, just to give it a try. What if I do this? It's strange for sure. Is that too weird? Yeah, maybe a little bit too weird. Let's just try azalea because that's the closest to like a yellow leaf block. I mean, it looks like a tree. What about yellow glass? Do I like that? I don't know. If I had paints. Yeah, I don't know if I'm into it. I feel like it looks too bright. Because everything here is... There's nothing really that bright looking here. So the yellow leaves, like, it feels weird. The drawing, it's more of a pale yellow. I don't know, sandstone walls might be too orange. It is pretty close to the color in the drawing. Will endstone look too weird? Because endstone's a little bit greener. It might look too much like bricks. I mean, if you squint, it doesn't look too weird. Yeah, it's strange. I should probably just stick to leaves. I don't know, it feels like it's the right color, but just, it don't feel right. It just don't feel right. There's a time and a place for using blocks in unconventional ways. I don't know if this is the place. Just gonna finish off this tree. It'll be azalea, it'll be fine. It looks like a tree. It doesn't have quite the same effect as it does in the drawing, but at least it looks like a tree. We got trees now. For the last step, which will be to just put bushes and ferns and things everywhere, all around this valley. So got some bushes. We don't really have a lot of good blue leaf options, so spruce will have to do. And also, the bushes have roses on them. We have to figure out how to do that. I do have invisible item frames. This kind of looks like a white rose. I can try putting those on there. The thing is, that's not rotated the right way. Let's see. Let's see what options we have. I think I'll need to settle for flares of wool, because that at least looks kind of like neutral. It doesn't really look like much else. Yeah, I'm gonna have to put these all over, but I might just put the roses and item frames in the close to the path, because otherwise it's gonna be a lot. I might also try to find some white flowers, and also some ferns and grass. I think I might also want to use like a bush. I think like in the distance, I'll just paint everything in with Axiom and World Edit, and then up closer, I'll build stuff by hand, so it's a bit more intentional looking. So let's go ahead, finish this place off, and make a bunch of plants. And now, I think it's complete. Look at this. I think I did a good job capturing the original drawing, the location. Feels very serene. Feels very bright. But yeah, it's a pretty good effect, like looking down at the tree there and all the plants around. And then you look up and there's just cliffs and more cliffs. And there's the sky. I think this build turned out really well. So yeah, that was pretty fun. I might make more of these types of videos where I rebuild Sylver Road locations in Minecraft. There's a lot of interesting other builds I could do, but for now, that will be it. Goodbye, everybody. Sam wishes you well.